The message arrived at 11:47 p.m., just as I was sitting alone in the kitchen, staring at a cold cup of tea and wondering when my marriage had become quieter than an empty house. It was from my wife's best friend, Maribel, and the words made my hands turn cold. Please meet me outside the old Sunrise Bridge at midnight. Don T. Tell Syra. It's about her. At first, I thought it was some cruel mistake, some misunderstanding meant for someone else, but then another message appeared before I could breathe. If you love your wife, come. Before this story continues, if you believe in kindness, forgiveness, and second chances, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel Ancient Truth. Sometimes one small act of compassion can change the ending of someone's life. I left the house while Syra slept in the bedroom upstairs, or at least I thought she was sleeping. For months, she had turned away from me before I could even ask how her day had been. We had once been the couple people smiled at in restaurants, the kind who held hands without noticing, who laughed at private jokes in grocery aisles. But lately, our home felt like a museum of things we used to be. Her coffee mug still sat beside mine, her scarf still hung near the door, her wedding ring still caught the morning light, yet she felt further away than anyone I had ever lost. The night air was cold, but it was the silence that frightened me most. The old Sunrise Bridge was usually beautiful during the day, arching over a narrow river where children fed ducks and elderly men played chess beneath the trees. At midnight, it looked abandoned, wrapped in mist and streetlight. Maribel stood near the railing in a long gray coat, her face pale, her eyes swollen like she had been crying for hours. She did not greet me. She simply handed me a small envelope with my name written on it in Syra's handwriting. I asked what was happening, but Maribel only shook her head and looked toward the river. She told me that Syra had made her promise not to say anything unless things got worse. Then she said the words that broke something open inside me. Syra was sick. Not in the way people say when they mean tired or sad, but truly sick. She had been hiding hospital visits, tests, and pain because she believed I already carried too much after losing my job and caring for my father before he died. She had convinced herself that silence was love, that protecting me meant disappearing from me piece by piece. When I opened the envelope, the letter trembled in my hands. Syra had written that if I was reading it, it meant Maribel had finally betrayed her promise, and she hoped I would forgive her friend before forgiving her. She wrote about the afternoons she spent at the clinic while I thought she was working late, about the fear that wrapped around her ribs every morning, about how she looked at me across the dinner table and wanted to tell me everything but could not bear to become another weight on my heart. She wrote that she had not stopped loving me. She had been trying to leave me with memories of strength instead of images of suffering. By dawn, I was sitting in the hospital waiting area with Maribel beside me, watching sunlight slowly fill the windows. The world outside was waking up, bright and ordinary, while mine had been split in two. When Syra saw me standing outside her treatment room, her face changed from shock to shame, then finally to exhaustion. She looked smaller than I remembered, wrapped in a pale blue cardigan, her hair tied loosely, her eyes carrying months of fear she had never allowed me to see. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to ask how she could shut me out of my own marriage. But when she whispered that she was sorry, all I could do was kneel in front of her chair and hold her hands like they were the last warm things left in the world. The days that followed were not beautiful in the way movies make healing beautiful. They were messy, frightening, and full of small heartbreaks. There were forms to sign, medicines with names I could not pronounce, bills that made my stomach twist, and mornings when Syra could barely lift her head from the pillow. Yet there was also light. Real light. Daylight spilling across our bedroom as I learned to make the soft rice porridge she could eat. Afternoon walks in the courtyard when she had enough strength to lean on my arm. Quiet drives to the clinic where she rested her head against the window and finally let me sit inside her silence instead of being locked outside it. I began to understand that love is not proven only in anniversaries, photographs, and happy seasons. Sometimes love is sitting on a hard plastic chair for 6 hours without complaining. Sometimes it is washing someone else's hair when their arms are too weak. Sometimes it is forgiving the person who hurt you because you can see the fear behind the wound. Syra had hidden the truth from me, and it had broken my trust, but I also saw the terrible tenderness in her mistake. She had tried to protect me with silence, not knowing that silence was the one thing that nearly destroyed us. Maribel became part of those days too. She cooked meals, argued with insurance offices, drove across town for medicines, and carried her own guilt quietly. One morning, as sunlight poured over the hospital garden, she told me that Syra had begged her not to interfere. Maribel said she waited too long because she was afraid of losing her best friend. I told her that sometimes saving someone means letting them be angry at you. She cried then, not loudly, but with the kind of relief that comes when a burden finally finds the floor. The hardest day came in the middle of summer, under a sky so blue it felt unfair. Syra's doctor called us in after another scan, and I remember noticing the dust floating in the sunbeam across his desk because my mind needed something small to hold on to. The treatment was working, but not fast enough. There would be more procedures, more pain, more uncertainty. Syra sat very still beside me. For a moment, I saw the old wall rising in her eyes, the instinct to retreat and suffer privately. So I reached for her hand before she could disappear again. I told her we would be afraid together. That became our promise. Not that everything would be fine. Not that love could magically cure what medicine struggled to fight. Just that we would be afraid together. And strangely, that promise gave us peace. We stopped pretending bravery meant never crying. We stopped measuring hope by perfect news. We began living in the small gifts the day allowed us. Breakfast by the window. Clean sheets. A nurse who made Syra laugh. A good test result. A bad day that ended with her still breathing beside me. Our marriage, which had once been dying from silence, slowly began to breathe again. Months passed, and autumn softened the city. Syra's strength returned in pieces. First, she walked to the gate without holding my arm. Then she cooked tea one evening and smiled when I said it tasted terrible because she had forgotten the sugar. Then one bright Sunday afternoon, she asked me to drive her to the old Sunrise Bridge. I was afraid at first, because that place still carried the memory of midnight and terror. But when we arrived, the bridge looked nothing like it had that night. Children were laughing near the river. Sunlight touched the water like gold. The trees moved gently above us, and Syra stood at the railing, breathing in the day as if she had been away from the world for years. She told me then that she had written another letter. This one was not an apology. It was a promise. She promised not to protect me by abandoning me. She promised to let love be shared, even when it was heavy. She promised that if fear came again, she would speak before silence built another wall between us. I did not need the letter, but I kept it anyway. Some words deserve to be saved because they prove that people can learn how to love better after almost losing everything. Near the end of her treatment, Syra began visiting other patients in the clinic garden. She would sit beside women who had just received frightening news and tell them gently that hiding pain does not make it smaller. She would tell husbands that helplessness is not uselessness, that showing up is sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do. I watched her become not the woman she had been before illness, but someone deeper, softer, and stronger. She carried scars, yes, but they did not make her less beautiful. They made her real. One afternoon, almost a year after Maribel's midnight message, Syra and I returned home from the hospital with news we had prayed for but were afraid to expect. The doctor had said the words carefully, but they rang through me like bells. Stable. Clear. Hopeful. Not a fairy tale ending, not a guarantee against tomorrow, but enough. More than enough. We stood in our kitchen, the same kitchen where I had once stared at a cold cup of tea and felt my marriage slipping away, and Syra began to cry. I held her as sunlight spread across the floor, and for the first time in a long time, our house did not feel empty. It felt alive. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to Ancient Truth. Your support helps more stories of love, forgiveness, and second chances reach the people who need them most. And before the ending, please comment "I believe in second chances" if you have ever seen love survive a difficult season. Years later, people would ask me when everything changed. They expected me to say it changed when the doctor gave us good news, or when Syra recovered enough to laugh again, or when our home became warm after months of fear. But the truth is, everything changed at midnight, when my wife's best friend broke a promise in order to save one. Everything changed when I learned that love is not only about being chosen in joy, but also being trusted in pain. Everything changed when Syra stopped trying to protect me from her darkness and finally let me stand beside her until morning came. Now, whenever the sun rises over the old bridge, I think of that night. I think of Maribel waiting in the cold with a secret too heavy to carry. I think of Syra's trembling hands, the hospital light, the fear, the forgiveness, the long road back to each other. And I think of this simple truth: sometimes the moment that feels like the end is only life begging us to begin again, kinder than before, braver than before, and never alone.